War transforms more than armies and nations. It transforms the ground itself. Long after treaties are signed and monuments are built, the earth carries the memory of destruction in ways that maps cannot show. The First World War carved itself into landscapes so deeply that in some places the terrain still bears its marks more clearly than history books. Fields, forests, mountains, wetlands, and coastlines became participants in the conflict, shaped by it, resisting it, absorbing it, and remembering it. The story of the Great War is often told through strategies, politics, and suffering, but it can also be read in mud, stone, water, roots, and soil, in places where the land learned the language of war and never fully forgot it. This is the story of landscapes that became battlefields, and battlefields that became landscapes again, though never the same. The war first carved itself into the farmlands of Western Europe. Before 1914, these regions were places of quiet continuity: orchards, vineyards, grain fields, villages with church towers rising above tiled roofs, roads worn smooth by carts and seasons instead of machines and war. When armies arrived, the fields became defensive grids and artillery corridors. Trenches ran where hedgerows once guided livestock. Orchard rows became firing lines. Vineyards were torn apart to make room for barbed wire and observation posts. Farmers' stone walls, centuries old, dissolved beneath explosives designed for moments rather than lifetimes. Shells rearranged the land into craters, sometimes so dense that the earth resembled the surface of another planet. Water filled the holes, turning fields into chains of artificial ponds. Soil mixed with iron fragments, wood splinters, bone, and chemicals. The ground became not only wounded, but unstable, sliding inward, collapsing, refusing to settle. Even when grass eventually covered it, the structure beneath remained fractured, layered with remnants of violence. Forests experienced a different transformation. Trees had marked territory long before humans divided it with fences and borders. They had been silent witnesses to previous wars, storms, and migrations. But the Great War changed forests in ways nature had never prepared them for. Artillery stripped them of identity, shredding bark, shattering trunks, leaving forests not as ecosystems but as open-air skeletons. Stumps stood like gravestones. Root systems rose from the soil like ribs. Where once the canopy filtered light in soft green tones, now only the sky remained, wide, indifferent, unbroken by leaves. Birds fled. Animals vanished or starved. The forest became a place where life paused, suspended between destruction and the long, uncertain work of recovery. Mountains experienced the war as excavation rather than destruction. In high altitudes where armies fought across ridges and glaciers, soldiers carved roads into cliffs, blasted tunnels into stone, and built fortifications that fused with rock. Ice fields absorbed trenches as lines etched into whiteness. Snow fell over gun positions and burial sites alike, concealing and preserving. Mountain peaks became places where the war never truly ended. As glaciers slowly shifted across the 20th and 21st centuries, they returned fragments of the conflict to the modern world. Boots, tools, rifles, human remains, objects carried forward by ice rather than time. In these regions, the war did not sink into soil or decay beneath grass. It froze into memory, sealed and waiting. Wetlands and marshes, too, became shaped by the demands of conflict. Armies attempted to drain them, fill them, reinforce them, or carve pathways through them. But wetlands resist control. They swallowed equipment, dissolved trenches, and turned movement into struggle. In some places, water reclaimed battle zones the moment fighting moved on. The land closed over traces of conflict, not through healing but through absorption. Beneath still water, wood decayed slowly, iron rusted gently, and bones rested in silt. The war remained present there, but out of sight, not erased, only hidden. Urban landscapes changed in another way. Cities experienced the war as absence rather than reshaping. Empty streets after evacuations, warehouses converted to hospitals, factories transformed from civilian to military production. Shelling erased buildings block by block. But what defined urban scars was not only destruction, but interruption. Neighborhoods half vanished, civic spaces fractured, communities displaced. Reconstruction rebuilt walls, but the shape of neighborhoods shifted, and with them, memory. Some landscapes became mechanically altered far beyond their pre-war form. Mines, quarries, and logistical hubs expanded rapidly to feed the enormous demands of total war. Hills disappeared to supply gravel. Rivers were straightened to improve shipping. Forests vanished into lumber for trenches, rails, and barracks. These changes outlived the conflict because economic structures continued them after peace returned. In these places, the war did not scar the land. It redirected its future. But perhaps the most powerful landscape of the Great War was no man's land, a space that existed not by geography, but by meaning. It was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, a narrow ribbon of territory that belonged to neither side and was claimed by both. No man's land showed what happens when land becomes purpose instead of place, when ground exists only as an obstacle or a risk. The meaning of the land dissolved into its tactical value. After the war, when fences disappeared and fields reopened, something intangible remained, the memory of uncertainty. When the guns finally stopped, the land inherited responsibility for remembrance. Grass returned, but it grew over ground seeded with iron and trauma. Forests regrew, but roots wrapped themselves around shells that never exploded. Farmers returned to plow fields, but their plows struck metal, glass, and bone. The post-war landscape became a layered archive, harvest above, history below. In some countries, entire regions were declared zones of silence, places too damaged, too dangerous, or too polluted to farm again. Nature reclaimed them slowly, producing forests that grew where villages once stood. These forests were not wilderness returning. They were monuments in the form of ecosystems. Elsewhere, the land healed unevenly. Some scars softened into gentle hills or depressions. Others remained visible from the sky like a second hidden map, the relief map of a war that had ended but refused to leave entirely. Travelers walked across peaceful meadows without realizing that the contours beneath their feet narrated a past that had not fully faded. The landscapes of the Great War became teachers of time. They demonstrated that war does not end when treaties are signed or when armies march home. It ends when the land finishes absorbing what humans forced upon it, and sometimes the land chooses not to finish. To walk through these places today is to hear history without sound. Wind passes through grasses that now grow where trenches existed, and water fills craters that no longer hold fear, but still hold memory. Birds perch on remnants of reinforced concrete. Trees grow through collapsed bunkers, their roots splitting architecture meant to outlast them. Life returns not in defiance of the past, but in conversation with it. The Great War shaped politics, societies, and lives, but it also shaped valleys, rivers, hills, forests, and coastlines. The earth did not fight, yet it endured. It did not choose, yet it remembered. And in the quiet layers beneath soil and stone, the war continues to exist, not as violence, but as topography. The land remains the final witness.